My titty hit the camera. We are back. We got the you finished yesterday. I got a couple more chapters left. I got me a couple more chapters left. Now that I'm back home, I can read it day by day. And let me get all comfortable so my gut not just sitting out, you feel me? Sitting here crisscross applesauce. When we left off at I believe chapter 28. Are you tapped into Zoe? Spencer is so Illuminati beef. No, I'm not. Um, so as y'all know, live in YouTube, we are finishing up the Matriarch by Miss Tina Knowles. We'll definitely be done with this book by the end of this week. And then after I finish doing my book club for that, I want to get into Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. So just bear with me. I already have another book ready to go for next week, and that is Quan Mills, Pastors Eat Pussy Too. So I'm really excited for that. And so let's get right into it. Chapter 29 is gonna take place. And should I let the book set against me like this? Maybe it could cover up my little gut. um Chapter 29 takes place in spring of 1997. It's called Naming Their Destiny. This chapter is entirely about, for the most part, how Destiny's Child got their name. So the chapter starts off, they got this record deal, and so now they can no longer go to regular high school. They got to get a tutor. And right now, Destiny's Child consists. Let me scoot over so I'm not feel like I'm leaning towards the mic, and I'll fix y'all right here. There we go. So Destiny's Child is currently consisting of Beyonce, Kelly, Latavia, and Latoya, the somewhat original bunch. Before that, we had the Girls Time bunch, but that's completely different. And then they were called the Dolls for a quick blip in time. And then we come at Destiny's Child. They have a tutor named Miss Dick. And Miss Tim talks about how since they was teenagers, they all thought that shit was so funny. And then she had the nerve to tell them her husband's name was Harry Dick. And she said Beyonce and Kelly had got up and was running around laughing around the house. So needless to say, Mrs. Dick did not last long as they tutor because them young ladies was not taking her ass seriously, because she was trying to be serious. And they was like, girl, your name is Mrs. Dick and your husband is named Harry Dick. That is just funny. But one thing that, as we know, and something this book has done is very much change a lot of perception of Matthew Knowles when it comes to who he is as a person, because I think a lot of time people just know that he ain't shit. He couldn't keep his dick. He couldn't keep his Mr. Dick in his pants. But Tina really is very transparent about how Matthew was a good dad, a good protector, and most importantly, he was a really good teacher for the girls when it came to, like, especially formative years, them being like young artists in the industry. He talks about how part of their lessons where they taught them to be very frugal, and they taught them to negotiate with their budget. Matthew's big things were the way that you make money, because one thing Matthew knows is all about making that motherfucking money. He always tells them you have to write your songs and touring. Those are the two ways you make money, because everything else is really going to be taken by the record company. And you want to be frugal in the first couple years so that you are not in debt to the record company. So something that they always did whenever they had hotels, they used to not stay at the most expensive hotels. Whenever they had to get the rooms, the girls would share a bed. Like sometimes they would get the two twins and there's 4 girls, they would each share a bed. So, and that's going to come out later when they get their first big check. They didn't really have to bust nothing down. They got to basically keep their first big check because of how frugal they have been. And that was something that Matthew taught them. So as we know, Miss Tina is hoodoo down to the ground. That Louisiana Creole be coming out of her so bad. But much like a lot of hoodoo women, especially hoodoo women of a certain age, she is very much a Christian. And I think that just on a little spooky tip, sometime when we think about our spirituality and, you know, getting into hoodoo and relating that back to African spiritual practices, especially as Black Americans, as the generations have gone on, you have to remember that even though our ancestors definitely kept their spiritual practices that they brought with them from Africa to America and hid them in the Bible because they had to, as the generations go on, you do have people becoming Christian and really believing in that as well, and really meshing the two religions, and being okay with shit existing simultaneously and on a parallel sphere, on a parallel in a parallel space. So something that Miss Tina does, and this is a hoodoo practice, your grandmama might do it. When you want something, whether it's something you write down or it's a picture of your people, if you want to, God to protect your people, you put their picture in the Bible. Now there are certain scriptures that correlate to certain things. Usually you might have been taught, if you have a prayer or a message you want to write down, you put it in the Bible. But Miss Tina obviously wants Destiny's Child to be very successful, so she has somewhat of like a promo picture of the girls, and she puts in she keeps in her Bible, just as a way to pray for them to be successful. This is a very common practice. This is just a very common practice. I don't even think a lot of Black Americans who are just Christian even associate this with being witchy or whatever. I think it's just considered normal at this point, but it is hoodoo. And so one day she opens her Bible and notices that the picture is in Ecclesiastes 9 verses 1 through 12. And though that if you know, and it's important for her to note that she uses the NIV Bible. Now, for my Bible scholars who went to BSF, the thing you need to know about the New International Version of the Bible is that it's written in very layman's terms. It's written so that the average person of today can understand the Bible. It's not like the King James Bible. So it's not like it's not written in Old English. That's what I'm trying to say. And then also the NIV Bible is divvied up, so you can see much like how she said it's the Ecclesiastes 9 verses 1 through 12, and that would have like a header, like a common destiny for all. So that would be like like the title of some of them scriptures that is coming. And so basically that scripture, they want to name a common destiny for all, the name of the group. Now, here's where they get themselves messed up at. That was the name of a gospel group in the 80s. And so they did not want to, have to deal with copyright and plagiarism, all that shit. So it's actually Matthew who adds the child at the end of Destiny. So we are in 1997. If you go back to the video beforehand, Uncle Johnny and Miss Tina had basically fallen out because of the man that he was dating. Uncle Johnny had a long-term boyfriend. He was with the man, they all called him Peanut, for about 6 or 7 years. Peanut died of breast cancer in the 80s. And so after that, Johnny was very heartbroken and he got with another man. Tina did not like that man. She felt like Johnny was too good for that man. And most importantly, she felt like that man was cheating on Johnny. And so they got into a lot of arguments over it. And so even though Johnny used to live in the apartment in the back of their house at Parkwood, he ended up, and that man had moved in at some point in time in the back of that house. He ended up moving. And so then they had a common friend, like in a group named Marlene. And when him and Tina had basically fell out, he started kicking it with Marlene hella heavy. I wrote down my dream job on a paper and put it in a cup of sugar. I got the job, but that is hoodoo. That is definitely hoodoo, child. That is definitely a little spooky dookie ookie shit to get that job, but nonetheless, it worked. So basically, for about a year, probably 2 years, Johnny and Miss Tina, they've been besties and like this their whole life. Right before he got sick, the last few years of his life, they wasn't kicking it heavy. Now, Johnny is her nephew and still came around to like all the family shit. So she definitely still saw Johnny on the holidays, at Beyonce and Solange's birthday parties, but they was not close kicking it every day like they had been beforehand. She talks about how she felt replaced by Marlene. It was like she had lost her best friend to one of her friends. And so that was a weird feeling. And so Marlene happens to be a nurse. So around this time of spring of 1997, as Beyonce's star is rising, Marlene comes to Tina and says, hey, Johnny is looking sick. And the thing about HIV is the way it can deteriorate your body, it happens quite quickly. And it becomes noticeable to those around you, especially to someone who would work in healthcare. So Marlene basically tells Tina, like, you and Johnny need to go fix this because he's clearly sick. And so Miss Tina plans this lunch with Uncle Johnny, in which she does try to ask him, "Are you healthy?" Right? And Johnny gets upset. And it starts an argument, which I can definitely see how that happens. And Miss Tina not wanting to, like, because she says when she saw him, she said Johnny was always skinny. And if you see the pictures that she has in this book of Johnny, he is always skinny. But she said, he was thinner than normal. It wasn't so bad that she would have thought something was wrong, but he did definitely look like he had, how when someone have a cold or they ain't been that well, like he just looked like he had not been well. And so from there, to avoid the argument, because she didn't want to argue with him, she changes the subject to Beyonce's prom dress, because Beyonce is about to go to prom at this. And I feel like this is so crazy how she ain't really kicked it with Johnny in hella long. And she trying to find out if he's healthy. And to avoid drama, she changes the subject to asking him about making Beyonce's prom dress, the dress that we now know to be Uncle Johnny made my dress. Them cheap spandex, she looks a mess. And so she talks about basically how that dress to this day, out of all the dresses her and Beyonce have seen over all the years, that was one of the best dresses. They just feel like that dress was so amazing. They loved it so much. If you've ever seen a picture of the dress, it's a very beautiful dress. It's very creative. It's very ahead of its time in terms of the way the sides were cut out. For that to have been so, like what? This was 1997. That's some shit that you see nowadays. So Uncle Johnny definitely did his big one. He was ahead of his time. He knew what the fuck was going on. During this point in time, LOL, Destiny's Child has their song "Killing Time" featured on the Men in Black soundtrack. So this is what really kind of changes the game for Destiny's Child. They got this record deal. They went in the studio. They made their album, and they picked their name. And it's like, one of the first songs they recorded gets featured on this huge movie, Men in Black. And so from there, like, their years of grinding is quickly taking off, because they have been at this point grinding for about 6 years. If you think about when Beyonce started Girls' Time and performing, Beyonce's been performing about a decade at this point. And so she ends this chapter with saying she had a feeling that, she was just very worried about Johnny. So she ends up adding a picture of Johnny to the pictures in her Bible. And she ends this chapter by saying she felt like something new was beginning, but also that something was ending. And so if you go to like the next chapter, which is called chapter 30, this chapter is called No Way Out. And it takes place in summer of 1997. So I think the really cool part is like all this backstory that she's able to provide in terms of the music that we now love. We know that No has 2 parts. But No part 2 was created because Wyclef was fucking late. So with the budget that the studio or that the label had given them, the girls decided they needed to have a hot artist featured on the hook, or like a rapper to do a verse in the songs. They chose Wyclef, and he was late. And so something, again, because Matthew has taught the girls to be frugal, and studio money is time. Like, that's money coming out their budget that they not going to see at the end of the day. They're trying to figure out ways to make this shit go fast. And so she talks about how Beyonce starts singing no, really fast. And Wyclef like, hold on, that sound good. And so that's really how that shit happened. There's a lot of that in this book, in terms of them just doing something and it just turning out. It's like, oh, we like that. So that's how that happened. So during a shoot, right? For this is so crazy, because when she said this name, I already knew who he was. I said, ain't that the man who died with Aaliyah? But she's going to do the makeup for Beyonce on the set of this music video, right? And who else is doing makeup on this set? Well, Chris Maldonado and Eric Farrell. Now, when I was reading this, like I said, I recognized Chris Maldonado's name because he was Aaliyah's makeup artist, as was Eric Farrell. They were stylists and did hair and makeup for Aaliyah. And Chris Maldonado was on the plane with Aaliyah when it went down, just so y'all know. And when she got there, they were being hella mean to her. Like, they were trying to funk with her. They made it very hard. They didn't let her use nothing. Um, and we later find out it's because they homegirl or they friend was supposed to be working this video shoot with them. And if you know how the industry works, typically people are hired and fired, but you can definitely be like, oh, I want this girl to do my makeup, but there's only room for like 3 makeup artists. So they friend got kicked out basically, and they thought that they knew that the person coming in to do the makeup and hair was somehow connected to Destiny's Child. They did not know that Miss Tina was Beyonce's mama. What they thought was that she was the director's girlfriend, which comes to be a joke now because Miss Tina was so much older than the director, but the director, they said, I forgot who directed it, but basically the director told them, I'm finna bring someone in to do their makeup. They just assumed that the girl was finna be his girlfriend or some little bitch she was fucking on. Miss Tina walked her ass in there. They like, oh my God, it's a sugar mama? And then Beyonce says, mom, da-da-da. I also think it's important to know that in this video, Miss Tina didn't bring enough bleach for Beyonce highlights and actually ended up cutting out some of her own blonde hair and like gluing it into Beyonce's hair. And you'll see a lot of this throughout this book. Miss Tina simply just making shit work. Like, she's so creative. But if you remember back from earlier videos when I was going through the earlier chapters, her mom, Miss Tina's mama, was a master seamstress. Her older sister is a master seamstress. Uncle Johnny was a master seamstress. Miss Tina herself is also a master seamstress. Like, these people were literally creating works of art in terms of clothes, and just Miss Tina was an artist. She was in a singing group when she was a teenager. Like, they were always very creative. So it's really not surprising that they were able to go into these spaces and really freak it. Aaliyah was so they ended up meeting Aaliyah on the set of Why they had a song in Why Do Fools Fall in Love. I can't remember what the hell song that was, but they had a song on the set of that, or they had a song on that soundtrack. And so they ended, since as we know, Chris Maldonado and Aaliyah was very good friends. They met Aaliyah on that set. Miss Tina talks about how they didn't even know it was Aaliyah because she was so chill. She was just over there chilling. Chris had asked her to do something. She just did it. They assumed she was somebody's assistant. And then she looked at me like, oh my God, it's Aaliyah, you know? So they also talk about how how hard Beyonce and the other members of Destiny's Child took Aaliyah's death. Now, you have to remember, Aaliyah was, I think, 2 years older than Beyonce. And there's a story in here about how Matthew and Miss Tina let Beyonce and them go out with Aaliyah. Aaliyah had just got her license, and she let Aaliyah drive them around or something along those lines. And Aaliyah was like, no, I got it. I'll have them back on time. So, Jamila and I talked about this on a podcast, how there, especially you see it now, there was like, oh, get on the bus. Thank you. There was a lot of camaraderie. And Get on the Bus was the song that was in Why Do Fools Fall in Love. There was a big part of camaraderie in the late 90s, early 2000s with like our superstars who are now in their 40s, like Beyonce. When you think of Beyonce, who else is from that time? Like, who was Beyonce age, child? I'm blanking, but y'all get what I'm saying. They were doing a lot of shows. They were opening shows together. They were doing a lot of things. They were backstage. So they did actually develop relationships and be the Ushers. Thank you. The Beyoncés, the Ushers, the TLCs, the Monicas, Maya. Oh my God. Thank you, chat. Thank you, chat. Cause that's what I needed. I was blanking. There, Miss Tina, and she's gonna name drop some more people in terms of the camaraderie that is amongst this generation of artists, because they really did get it out the mud together. They was backstage and they was in the trenches together. So they took Aaliyah's death very hard. And she talks about how that's something that they took hard. Another thing she mentions is how Columbia did not want to invest in Destiny's Child, and we'll see this later, because they were investing in their white artists. And so that is really how Miss Tina ended up being the stylist. Originally, obviously, Miss Tina was always making their outfits, but once they got this budget, there was this sense that they was on a record label now. So the record label was gonna get them outfits. That's not what happened. She talks about how they would get shit like just plain black dresses. And Miss Tina, if you remember the videos I made earlier, I can't remember what chapter it was, but it was in Act 1 when she was talking about when she was in the Veil Tones, which was a singing group she was in when she was a teenager. She was always so concerned with the outfits. And so she wanted everyone to have a very specific look so they all could look different and all look interesting, because she understood even at that young age that half the battle is getting people to look at you so that they have to notice you so they can look at your talent. And so that was the same thing she had in mind for Destiny's Child in terms of, I mean, yeah, these girls are talented. We just can't put them in these boring ass black dresses. Who was going to want to look at them, child? Don't nobody want to look at that. So we see this chapter talks about Angie. This is where Angie comes. Angie Beyonce, who was her brother Larry's daughter, who we all know, cousin Angie. And we do know from the chapters previous that Angie has been coming to stay with Miss Tina and the Knowles family every summer since she was like 8 or something like that. So she is a staple in their household. But by this time, she is working as the assistant for Destiny's Child. And that's another thing that you should notice about Miss Tina and the Knowles. They put their people on. So it was Angie who ends up going to get, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. I think I am. Yeah, that's in the other chapter. But she talks about how Angie is such a hustler. She had got Angie a little purse when she was like 13, and she got herself a big purse. And Angie said, girl, I want the big purse. And she said, you got to go earn the big purse money, girl. So she said ever since then, Angie be earning that big purse money. She don't give a damn. Angie Beyonce is a hustler. And then this is the part where she actually hands over headliners to Abel, her assistant, mentioned in one of the previous videos, scot-free. She doesn't make him pay for it. She takes us back to the story of Linda, whose mama died, and she gave her rosary dress from the earlier chapters when she was like 5 or 6 years old. She said it just felt good because she knew Abel would take care of it, but she was no longer in a space where she could pour into headliners because she was now transitioning into being with Beyonce and them full time. So in chapter 31, it's called The Style Takes It, and it takes place in March in 1998. Just know from here on out, they finna be fucking with Destiny's Child, telling them they too motherfucking black. That's all you need to know. And it's funny because obviously when Beyonce Gate was going on, I made a whole video talking about how Beyonce and them have been black since the beginning. But you know what's funny? I think that learning how intentionally black Beyonce's parents are. I mean, when you think about things like Beyonce's dad went to a HBCU, her mom was involved in the civil rights movement. Like, these are things that people are like, okay, you know, I can see you're proud of being black. But then it's like when you have that piece where your parents were really outside and really pouring into you and really like lifting you up and praising you and making sure that you're proud of who you are, it's a different level. And just knowing how intentional both Tina and Matthew were in terms of ensuring from the beginning, not just when we get to this part. You got to go back and watch my previous videos. They are on YouTube. My YouTube channel is Meccavellii, and they're all the book clubs. From the moment she had Beyonce and Solange, Miss Tina and Matthew was very intentional in terms of making sure that they were proud of being black women. So that, I think that's part of the reason it has translated over the years so authentically, because this is really simply who they are. Columbia was constantly trying to change their style. You have to remember 2 women who are their label mates, and you're going to hear their names a lot throughout these chapters, are Britney Spears and Jessica Simpson. And so they're constantly comparing them, basically saying, don't you want to go mainstream? Don't you want to be more accepted? There's a story during MTV Spring Break where the costumes got lost. And so they're in Jamaica, and Miss Tina's like, what the fuck are we finna do? What the fuck are we finna do, bro? We don't have no costumes. And we gotta do it impromptu. So she sees like these cargo shorts and baggy cargo shorts and shirts And she remembers she had seen Master P, who was from Louisiana and had been they had been calling themselves soldiers, and how they, just how Master P used to wear the cargo. He had made that popular. So she takes these cargos, she takes the shorts, she starts hemming them in, and she styles Destiny's Child kind of akin to like how Master P would be wearing the big cargo shorts. And it's a fucking hit. When they come out, Wyclef is like, yo, you need to fucking do this all the time. You need to fucking do this all. Like, I think it's hella funny that Wyclef looked at this and said, yeah, you need to be their stylist. And so the No Limit theme from Master P, that was impromptu. That really happened because their costumes got lost on the way to Jamaica. And so from then on out, she is their stylist. What also happens during this show is Beyonce had these boots that she kept saying she knew she was gonna fall in because they weren't steady, and she ends up falling back on stage during this performance, but she saves it by falling back and twisting around, which becomes an iconic Beyonce move. Now she do it on purpose, but at the time it was a mess up. And she talks about how like that can speak to like the genius of Beyonce's intuition as a performer. So once she became their official stylist, again speaking of her group and the Veltones, she did want each girl to have their own specified look. So she literally meets with them and says, "So girl, what you want to look like? What you want to be?" So she talks about how Beyonce liked wearing long dresses. And I think also, if you ever look at the old school Destiny's Child picture, this is how much Beehive I am. I didn't even have to Google this. When I read this, I knew what she was talking about. It's like she really was styling them girls based on what they had told her. So she knew Beyonce told her she liked the long dresses. Kelly and Latavia liked this short little mini skirts and hot pants to show their legs off. And Latoya liked crop tops to show her stomach and midriffs. And if you ever go, like, you can Google any Destiny's Child picture right now, them girls gonna be wearing exactly what they told Miss Tina, because she has styled them according to what they like. And I also think this speaks to, I ain't never gonna fake the funk. I do think it was clear that the Knowles, Tina and Matthew, poured into their daughter. They knew their daughter was gonna be a star. They got behind this group so heavily because they believed in Beyonce. But I do think they did have a vested interest in the success of the group and the success of the girls. When we just reading about everything that they did for the girls as individuals as well, it's like, you can't really say these people didn't give a fuck about these young ladies. You know what I'm saying? Like, letting them sleep at their house, making sure they all was fed, getting all their costumes, Like, care was always part of the story. Like, they definitely took care of the other girls from Destiny's Child. And I think that, when we talk about the drama, because we're going to get into it, I just don't like how that's left out, okay? Especially reading this and now knowing for real, like, what they was doing and how much they poured into not just their daughter, but for real, everybody. It's like, okay, well, you can't say these people are such evil villains. They clearly not that. Okay. So after this, she talks about how making the costumes for Destiny's Child took her back, because if you remember from the earlier chapters, she was making costumes for the Veltones with her mom, because remember, her mother is a master seamstress, right? And she just said she was like, it was like she was transported. It was like, the worlds were switched now. Now Beyonce and them is helping her make their outfits. And she was just like, it was a really nice full circle moment. And in that, she found her passion for designing, because I think she kind of took advantage of the fact that her mom was a seamstress. Her sister was a seamstress. Johnny was a seamstress. She talks about how all of her nieces and nephews can sew. Like, sewing was such an integral part. Sewing garments, designing clothes was kind of like second nature to her and their family. So she didn't see it as a passion. And it wasn't until she was really designing and doing everything for Destiny's Child that she was like, no, I actually love this, because before it was just something like, this is what my family do. And I think that that's really cool, because if you come from a family where everybody does one big thing, or everyone that has maybe a specific skill, sometimes it can just be second nature, and you don't even realize you might really have a passion for it. You might really be good at it, because you're just kind of on airplane mode, like you're just kind of on autopilot doing what everyone else does. So I think really having to think about what each girl wanted to wear, styling each girl according to what they liked, made her have to think about and delve deep into the passion. Something else I think, and it like unlocked a new level of creativity in her that we're gonna see like as these chapters go on. Something else that I like about what they did. Now, at the time, this was seen as country, which we're gonna learn. They thought Miss Tina was so country and ghetto and black, and all the colors was loud. The girls was in sequin. She was very intentional. Like, she put them in all them big ass hair, glittery ass colors, bright ass colors, because she was thinking, and she was right. If I'm all the way back here in the stages, all the way down there, you still want to be able to see the performer. Like, we need to put them in shit that the motherfuckers in row 127 gonna still see. And see, that's where she was coming from, and how she was designing them. She was way ahead of her time. The country on my shirt is Kenya. And so when designers started getting a hold of Destiny's Child, she said it was like a practice. I don't know how it is now, but she said what they would do, because they knew it was 4 girls in the group. She calls them superstar outfits. So the designer might send 1 or 2 superstar outfits, and then the other 2 dresses would be real plain. And her whole thing was like, I want all the girls to look, I want all of them to be in superstar outfits. So I can't put them in one sole designer. So at a time where it seems silly now, but because we see motherfuckers wear whatever the fuck they want to wear. But at a time where it was not at all popular, it was considered taboo to be mixing designers on the red carpet. Miss Tina would put like them in Valentino, her in Versace, her in Mugler. And it was really just determined on so they could all have a superstar outfit and not be and not have one of them looking like drab in the background. And I thought that was like another example of how she was thinking about how she wanted everybody to look good and look their best. The girls, Solange, where am I at? Gets treated crazy. They get treated crazy backstage. That's something that's gonna become a theme. Solange, meanwhile, is at home in Houston because she do not like traveling. You got to remember, at this point, Solange is about 13. Is she? She born in 86. No, she about 11, 12. She about 11 here. And she back home in Houston. She don't want to travel with them worth a damn. She said, I like my house. I like my school. I like my friends. And she gets involved in a church club called the God Pound. It's like dog pound, because dog is God spelled backwards, but it's called the God Pound. Oh, Christians. And so she's the secretary of the God Pound. And Miss Tina has this thing where she don't want to go no more than 4 days without seeing her daughter. So she starts popping up on Solange, and Solange don't really like it. Solange basically communicates, hey, Mom, if you're going to come, let me know. And Miss Tina is one to respect her daughter, so she starts letting her know when she's going to come into town. And all that. Is this where we get into the Vans? Okay. You know what? It's funny. You always know people are churchy. Miss Tina and them are really churchy. But let me tell you this. If you know anything about the church denominations, Beyonce was raised hella motherfucking churchy. You wouldn't know it though, because Miss Tina not hella fucking loud and shit, but that makes sense because it's like Miss Tina was raised Catholic and then she raised them Methodist. And if you know anything about like Methodist or AME, that's not like a Kojic. That's not a Baptist. That's not a Pentecost. Okay. The Methodist people is a bit more calm and relaxed in what they do. Just know that they don't do all the hoopla for real. So, right, that's why I'm like, oh, Miss Tina and them is some churchy-ass Methodist folks, child, some churchy-ass Methodists. Because When Destiny's Child, as I remember I said, Matthew and them had taught them to be frugal, so that when they got their first big checks, they made $85,000 per piece, right? And wait, Beyonce is Methodist, and you right, we aren't that loud. I know. I've been to Methodist church. Y'all do not be doing all that. But Beyonce was raised Methodist, yes, Black Methodist. So, and Miss Tina, to this day, in the church that they went to in Houston, St. John downtown, she's still very involved. And all through the books, she talks about being involved during their whole childhood. I'm about to tell you what how she taught the girls how to tithe. About 2 years ago, they opened a homeless shelter on behalf of St. John's. She's still very involved in her church. That's the whole thing. But each girl gets $85,000 per piece. Now, obviously, we know that Kelly is living with Beyonce and the Knowles family. She has started calling Auntie Tina, and she's called Matthew Dad. And so, since they live under Miss Tina Ruth, Miss Tina pulled a Miss Lindy and said, "All right, now it's time to tithe. Time to get your tithe and your offering." It's just so funny because if you have a churchy ass black mama, that first little money you get, one thing your mama is gonna ask you: have you tithed? Have you tithed yet, girl? So she talks about how instead of just having the girls tithe their little 10%, the church needed vans, and so she says, "Listen, if you she gives the example of how her mama told her to tithe. And it's so crazy because my mom has said the exact same thing that Miss Tina mom said to her back when she was poor, and her mom would put money in the tithe and the offering. And Miss Tina would be like, "Mom, we're poor." And her mom would look at her and be like, "This money we're poor, yes, but this money, us giving this money to the church, is why we're still afloat." My mom used to say shit like that all the time. And even if you're not Christian, if you read books like Happy Pocket Full of Money, or you understand the law of like giving back, of manifestation, of giving and receiving, a non-Christian way to put this is, you cannot get anything in your hand if it is closed. I can't put nothing in here. Your hand has to be open, and you have to be willing to give, and it's a cycle, right? And even if you look at all the religions of the world, they talk about that cycle of giving and receiving. And so what she told the girls, they all wanted to get cars, right? And so they couldn't get the big fancy cars that they wanted to get because Miss Tina had them buy these vans for the church. But Miss Tina told them, "Listen, you give this money to the church now. Your next check, you're gonna be able to get any car you want to." And so yeah, I'm not, but I do give. I mean, listen, you don't have to give specifically to a church if that's not your judge. That's why I said this is actually a universal law of giving and receiving. And the more generous you are, the more you receive. Now, it might not always come back to you in terms of actual dollar amount, actual money, but you will receive what you need in that moment. And if you notice, very rich people are very generous for a lot of reasons, tax breaks and all that. But if you are a level of spirituality, there is a level of like, it's a constant cycle. And so she teaches them that. Something else, as we know, the record company still calling them black as fuck, and they ain't shit. And I thought this was funny. And this is how, you know, again, Miss Tina and them are so black. The record company, in an attempt to like insult and shade them, kept comparing them to the Supremes in Motown. Like, they would tell Destiny's Child, like, "Oh, y'all giving too much Motown." And obviously, Miss Tina and Matthew, as parents of a certain age, are like, "Well, yes, like, duh, that is exactly what we would love to give." This is not an insult the way that you're thinking it is. Like, we're black. That's a compliment. And I constantly think about that, like, at a place in my life where, like, me and Jamila are starting to get noticed by mainstream. Like, I'm just kind of happy I'm reading this book for my own purposes, because the one thing you will notice, if you always be yourself, motherfuckers gonna have to fall in line, right? I've constantly said, if I'm not never anything but black famous, I'm okay with that. That's cool, right? You can't insult me by telling me I have a niche black audience. That's what I want. That's who I am. I'm sure my audience is very niche and very black because that's exactly who I'm talking to, right? If other people want to sit here and watch and join, cool, but like that's not an insult to me. And I think that that's another reason why Beyonce has gone as far as she has, because she had parents behind her who, when they tried to insult her by comparing her to Motown and saying it's giving the Supremes, they were like, well, yes, exactly, duh. You know, like, yeah, no, that's, yeah, thank you. What do you want? Like, you're comparing me to Diana Ross. Like, I'm supposed to be mad? That's supposed to piss me off? You're doing a bad job of it, you know? And I think that when black people start worrying about going too mainstream, and obviously mainstream means like trying to whitewash themselves and like trying to fit themselves in boxes that are not their own or that they don't naturally fit into, that's really where you lose the plot. You lose the plot when you're not being yourself. And she just had parents who recognized that in not just her, but in 4 black girls from Houston. Like, they are country down. They are black down to the ground. And that's always going to be what they're going to be. So Matthew being the business genius, like, you got to get Matthew Knows this. That motherfucker a business genius, chair. I ain't going to get him that. He every time she say Matthew had an idea, you know it's finna be some shit, girl. Matthew going to do something, get them out this little pickle. So while the record company was trying to insult them by calling them the motherfucking Supremes, Matthew said, okay, boom, you don't like it? We going to start going overseas. And we're going to get them overseas. We're going to get to the European market, and we're going to go overseas. And now, again, when I think about Beyonce being such an international superstar, I'm like, damn. Because she spent the early formative years of her career actually cultivating that audience overseas. Matthew said, oh, if y'all not gonna see it for them, cool, we gonna get that recognition overseas so that when we come back to America, y'all have no choice but to recognize their success. And like something I've often said, if you can get internationally famous, I know that America, we treat ourselves like the end all be all, but baby, if you get that international fame, baby, you eat forever. You will eat forever, bro. You'll eat forever. There are 2 ways that you can eat forever. Being well known in your community, whether that be like a black community, whether that be in the community that you're from. So like when we think of Lil Boosie, why is Boosie always relevant? Because that nigga stay in the South. He do them shows down south where he from, where they respect him. He don't be trying to be up there in New York. He don't be trying to be over there in California. He don't be trying to be over there in Chicago. Boosie badass. Stay where motherfuckers like him, respect him, and go up over his music. The same could be said for overseas. Like, if you can get respect internationally or very locally, you eat for life, girl. That's why motherfuckers, bitch, I don't need to be nowhere but either Houston or motherfucking Sacramento. I eat forever, girl. I don't give a damn. Y'all be trying to do too much. Hey, you be trying to go into hoods that's not your hood. That's why exactly, why you over there in that hood that's not your hood? They don't know you in that hood. They don't respect you in that hood. They don't get what you're doing in that hood. And you wondering why you not having success in that hood. That's why. And that's on Beat King. Beat King, listen. And when I say that motherfucker will be outside of Houston, same thing with Slim Thug. That motherfucker Slim Thug. Yeah, like, go be a local celebrity. Motherfuckers always want to fry that up and make it seem like, oh, he ain't never left the city. Why would you leave the city that motherfuckers respect you in? Why would you leave the city where you can walk through a club, you get love? Duh, you not finna leave. Y'all don't get that, so y'all don't get it. Ooh, that's a bar. I just ate y'all up low-key. Y'all don't get that, so y'all don't get it. I get it. So chapter 32 is called Johnny. It takes place in summer of 1998. And this is Uncle Johnny's final chapter. So Uncle Johnny begins acting erratic, and Johnny's mom is Selena is Tina's oldest sister. Selena is her mother's first child. So, and she says Selena and Johnny had the same type of relationship that she had with her girls. So Johnny was acting erratic basically as fuck. The family wasn't really hearing from him. And he wasn't even really talking to Selena, his mama, which was not like him. That's how they knew something was wrong. So she's old. Selena's still living. She in her 90s, I believe. And Johnny is 48 when he dies. And Selena was about 20 something when she had Johnny. So Selena was for sure in her 60s. Selena was a Grammy. And so yeah, he's acting erratic. They finally find him, and it's because he ended up getting hospitalized. And so he is diagnosed with AIDS-related dementia. So that means it is dementia that is brought on by AIDS that was caused by the HIV virus. The way it affected Uncle Johnny was it made him delirious, and it made him very paranoid. And so it got to the point where he could not live alone. So they had to put him in a system. Well, he was living with Selena for a moment, and then once it got really bad, they had to put him in a home. And they told him Tina talks about how the people explain is like, this is gonna be where he lives until he goes to hospice. So he wasn't so bad. Then they called it assisted living. It wasn't a nursing home because he could still get around on his own, but he was definitely on the decline. She talks about how he was like he was incontinent, which means like you have to wear diapers. And on the weekends, Miss Tina goes and gets him. So at this point, as we know, the last few years before Uncle Johnny is diagnosed with AIDS, him and Miss Tina are not on the best of terms. But it's like at this point they in their 40s. Like, you got to think about it. This your best cousin since she was a kid. The last 2 years you ain't been talking to the nigga, and now he gets dementia. It's not like you finna not show up. Like, bro, we only not been talking for 2 years, please. So she goes and gets him on the weekend. And he comes and stays with Beyonce and Solange because it's important for him to spend time with Beyonce and Solange. Especially since, if you remember from the earlier chapter, Solange's therapist, who was also a gay black man, died of AIDS very suddenly. So Solange she was really worried about how this was going to affect Solange, because she had already seen that happened very quick, but Uncle Johnny's decline was very slow. She talks about how she would try and keep him the whole weekend, and a lot of times he would end up staying till Monday, but they would always send only the home would only send enough diapers for one extra day. So after that, she would just go ahead and take him back to the home. And from there, he then transitions into hospice. Now, Miss Tina decides, once Uncle Johnny transitions into hospice, if you do not know what hospice care is, it's end of life care essentially. You are there to be comfortable until, God calls you home. And you go to hospice once it's gotten to a certain point. Miss Tina decides she do not want Solange and Beyonce to see Uncle Johnny in this very vulnerable state. If you know about the last stages of dementia, it can get very intense. And I think since Beyonce was 17, Solange was 13, it sounded like in the book it was a little bit combination of both. She felt like they were too young for that, but also it came from a place of respecting Johnny and not wanting just everybody to see him like that. Which that's like when you think about how much you love somebody, it's like, damn, that can be considered the lowest point of their life, and you don't want everybody to see them like that. Despite all of this, she says Johnny was still very goofy. He was still, he would have moments where he was himself. He was beefing with one of his, the man across the hall, because his dementia was so bad that he thought Miss Tina was his mama. And he used to be talking to Tina. And I guess he was a gay man too. And Uncle Johnny would be like, that queen is trying to hog up all my time with you. Like, nah, fuck him. And he was like not having it. And Miss Tina used to have to tell Uncle Johnny to be nice. she describes Uncle Johnny as one of them type of men who was always saying something slick to the side. So he still had kept that in terms of like, girl, leave that queen alone. You over here seeing me like I ain't having that. So he was still very spicy and goofy. And so she tells a couple stories about his decline, but he eventually ends up dying on July 29th. Now, this is what I was actually talking about on TikTok earlier today. T.S. Madison, shout out to Maddie, had noticed when she interviewed Miss Tina that Renaissance dropped on July 29th of 2022, and Uncle Johnny died July 29th of 1998. It's been and Miss Tina is shocked if you go look up the interview. This is recent; it just dropped last week. Miss Tina is shocked by this because she didn't know, Beyonce would not have known that. And so there was, much discrepancy in my comments talking about like, how would Beyonce not know the death date, da 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 da. And I was just making my videos based on like, listen, there's only one person who I know the day they died. That's my grandmother. My mother's mother died the day before my mother's birthday. Which, how can you not fucking remember that, right? But I even had a cousin who died close to my birthday. And I only remember she died close to my birthday because I had to rearrange my birthday plans. I could not tell you exactly what day she died. Somebody said that, how would you not know this? You don't put the funeral collages up. I mean, we never put the funeral collages up in my house. We had a drawer for obituaries, and I could only speak on me. Like, I don't know the days. Like, the people in my family who have transitioned, we celebrate them on their birthday. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know people's birthday. I don't know the day that everybody done transitioned. And I actually don't think a lot of people do, unless that's something you look at all the time. I think it's very believable. Now, somebody said, oh, well, Beyonce sang at Uncle Johnny's funeral because they sang a song Destiny's Child sang. And I was like, well, yes, she sang at his funeral when she was 17. When she dropped that album, she was 40 something. Do I think she remembered the space and time Uncle Johnny died? Yeah, she probably remembered he died, August, July, somewhere in there in the summer. Do I think she had the actual July 29th date? No, I think that was, like, as we say, that was the ancestors. That was Johnny. That was him being like, this my day, right? But I don't know. Just like how I'm saying, I know my cousin died around my birthday and her funeral was somewhere in there. I don't know the date. Also, again, I think it's fair to also remember Miss Tina did not want the girls to see Uncle Johnny. So hypothetically, they would really have just came in and sang at the funeral. Funerals are typically a week or two after the person transitions. If the man died the last couple days of July, I would assume his funeral was in August. That's number one. She was 17. That's number two. I can't tell you the day of no one died when I was 17. Why would that's not children's business to be in. Number three, even if she did go out of her way to get it, like, she would have to find Johnny obituary or something very specific to know that, which Miss Tina says she didn't. So that's why I'm saying I think it's very believable that Beyonce did not know the exact date of Johnny's death, and we can say that I think it's a safe assertion to say that was the ancestors working. I think it's a good assertion to say the ancestors were working in that case, and Johnny knew that album was for him and said, okay, so we gonna make it come out on my day, and that's just the end of that. Okay, so how many chapters? I got like 3 more because I still want to talk about. I was late, y'all, but it's been about an hour. I still want to talk about Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. Okay, so we're in October of 1998. It's called A New Beginning, and we're in chapter 33. They're doing a second album that is being produced by Candy Burris and Shakespeare. Miss Burris. Candy Coated Nights. Candy Coated Factory. She's been around for so long, producing things. And she's also her and Shakespeare are coming off the success of No Scrubs. I don't want no scrub. The scrub is the guy that can't get no love from me. You might know that song. Um, and so Matthew, once again, you gotta give Matthew his tens. Matthew's the one who wanted Candy and Shakespeare for this album. He was super excited to get them. And she talks about how they let Beyonce, again, if you look at Matthew hammering home that the way that music artists make their money is by writing their own songs and by touring. And Beyonce wanted to get up under them and learn this shit called producing and writing. Candy and Shakespeare, to their credit, let Beyonce take the lead on this album, to the point where kind of Tina and Matthew are a little bit concerned, because they're like, okay, she's still only 17. We hired y'all to produce. Why are y'all letting her do all this? But then they take a step back and they're like, hey, this is a good teaching moment. She's being taught and mentored and nurtured by some of the best producers and writers in the game. Hold on, let me get some water, y'all. I'm hella thirsty. I've been talking for an hour straight. And Miss Tina makes a point there. She said, this is an education that money couldn't buy. So we're not going to do what we usually like to do and step in and say something. We just going to see how it turns out. And obviously it turns out good, because that second album will become Writing on the Wall. Now, Miss Tina and her spooky ass Bible. Miss Tina and her old hoodoo Louisiana ass. Ask me how they named that second album. I'll say Miss Tina busted that NIV Bible out once again. What is this? Oh shit, my shit finna die. Okay, YouTube. I'm gonna have to get up with y'all later. I will keep going for the live though. So just let me turn off my camera. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. And I don't want my camera